Okay, hello everyone. So if you're here from the deck profile, 6th place Vancouver Regional, or if you're here from the Sunavalon Discord, if you're just interested in learning the deck, this will be an in-depth combo guide to Sunavalon Rika. I've been playing this deck for quite a long time. I think I'm quite familiar with it, and it's a really, really fun deck to play, but it's also quite complicated, and there's a lot of stuff that you need to understand before you play this deck correctly. So this video will be in 4 parts. The first part is going to be going over some of my deck building choices, as well as explaining the kind of relevant differences between the two major Sunavalon variants, that's Sunavalon Rika and Rika Sunavalon, and which one you might want to choose. The second part will be about the main combos, so I'll go through the two main combos, the safe combo and the aggressive combo. I'll also talk about what happens, how to play out hands that seem a little bricky or don't have combo in an immediately obvious way, and go over some of the variants for those combos. The third part will be about technical play. So this is going to be what, in my opinion, probably the most important part of the video if you are already somewhat familiar with the deck, but just want to learn some of those like small details or things that you may not immediately have been aware of. So go over, for example, combat tricks, things you can do during the battle phase, and how to approach playing into and around hand traps and into boards. And the final part will just be some things to remember and be aware of. They won't come up every game, but they will be useful to know, especially in situations where you have to basically squeeze every last drop out of the deck to win. So let's start with what I think is probably the strangest part of my deck, and something that if you look at any other Sunavalon topping list in probably the last, like this format or the next, the last format, you won't see this. And that's because it's a sort of a different list than other topping lists that you probably may have seen. So first things first, this is a Sunavalon Rika list, which means that I'm focusing on the Sunavalon or the Sunseed engine and trying to resolve the combo, right? A lot of other topping lists, especially in the Power of the Elements format, are doing the opposite, where they're treating Sunavalon as just a mini engine, running Unexpected Die to E-Tally out, getting to Jasmine and Bengal Lancer, and then using it to access the Rika part of the deck. That version of the deck plays a lot more flex slots. It tends to be more mid-range. You can grind for a few turns, and it's not really all-in focused on the combo. This version of the deck is all-in focused on the combo, right? So these cards do not appear in a lot of other lists, right? Most people are playing one copy of Sunline Sewing and no copies of Shrine. And the reason for this is because before Power of the Elements, the way the deck was most commonly built was as a completely, like, absolutely one-shot all-in Wombo combo deck. You wanted to force your combo through using Punk or Adventure cards, and this did not really contribute to your win con this didn't really contribute much to that except by just being a search target off of Dryas. If you drew this card, it was a brick. Once you went through your combo once, which is protected, this card is basically useless. You don't want to draw it. It doesn't do anything on its own because for those of you who aren't familiar with Sunavalon, maybe you're just curious of the deck. This is not a starter, even though it's summoned Sunseed from the deck. It's actually you need to have like the Dryas already on field to really do anything with it. So in that version of the deck, you don't want to draw this. You just want to search off Dryas. It's a brick. And there's no real reason to resolve the combo twice, because once you build your board, you're either winning immediately or you're losing because you got hit by like Dark Ruler or Droplets. So in that version of the deck, this card was a one of. Definitely didn't play this. But come Power of the Elements, we're playing a version of the deck which has a lot more plant monsters, and plant monsters actually make this card a lot stronger overall. Because if you open any level 4 or lower plant monster, then you can still combo off with this card if you hard draw this card, right? So let's say, for example, I open a copy of Laurel, or let's say I open a copy of Princess, or if I'm like really down bad, I open a copy of Twin, right? Any of these cards plus your hard drawn Sunbind Sewing is still going to get you to combo, and you're playing a lot more of these cards in the deck anyways. So because of that, Sunbind Sewing becomes a much stronger draw, and it's a card that you want to hard open rather than a card that is just a brick, right? It is not a brick here. It is one of your strongest extenders because you just normal or special summon whatever monster you have in hand. You link directly into the Dryas. Dryas can't use its effect here just because you need to have a it needs to be made with Sunseed Genius Loci in the EMZ to get its effect, but if you just activate Sunbind Sewing, you're still getting 2 bodies off of this. So it's just a really strong card to draw. In addition, playing Shrine, which I think is a very strong card, makes the Sunbind Sowing even better. One of the reasons this card was treated as a brick is because if you activate this card, you summon out Loki, you don't do anything with it. You just make a Dryas. What is this Dryas going to do? Absolutely nothing, right? But if you're able to search Shrine, then activating Sowing is going to get you to the Shrine. You activate Shrine, you pitch, and now you already have two bodies on the field. Um, Later on, we'll talk about the importance of having three bodies, which is the Jasmine plus the Tribute. Well, just hard activating Sowing, drawing nothing else is going to get you 2 out of 3 other bodies that you need. And even with 2 bodies, you can do some stuff, albeit not very good, right? So for those reasons, in my opinion, if you're playing the combo version of the deck in this current format, I think it's very important to play multiple copies of Sun by Sowing. I also think it's very important to play a copy of Shrine. This card has additional utility, which when we go through the combos and I talk about, the technical play stuff, you'll see that this card does have additional utility. But I think these cards are very important. Now, you can definitely cut 1 copy of Sun by Sowing. You can play 2 and 1, but I think you definitely want to play more than one copy of this. Now, you're not always trying to resolve it twice per game, right? You very often or frequently are still only resolving it once. We're not playing 3 copies because we want to have a better grind game. We're just playing 3 copies because we want to see this in our opening hand. And even if this gets ashed, which is a big choke point of the deck, ashing this hurts a lot. Even if you hard draw it and it gets ashed, it's still serving as an extender because if you open it, you've added Shrine instead of this, which means you can just play Shrine and you have 2 bodies instead of 1. Obviously, 2 is better than 1 here. So those are just some of the main reasons why I'm playing the multiple copies of Sunbind Sowing. This is, again, probably one of the only big deck building differences you'll see in my list versus other lists, and I'm just trying to explain here why I'm doing it. And I definitely recommend, if you do want to play the combo heavy variant of this deck, post Power Elements, to consider playing multiple Sowing. If you're playing the Rika version where you're just trying to resolve the Sunseed combo once in order to get to Jasmine, get to the pedal, then just cut all this. You don't need it. Just play the 1 copy of Sowing. You're not trying to make the Sunavalon combo a main part of your deck. You're trying to make the grind part the main thing. Whereas the Sunavalon combo is just something you resolve one time. It's just helpful. It gets you to a bigger board. But if you're playing this version, it's combo heavy, then definitely play this stuff. Okay, so that's the main deck building thing that I wanted to go over. So next we have the combos. There are 2 main combos that I use, alongside a couple of variations depending on what cards I open or depending on the situation. For example, if I brick or if I'm not able to, don't open with Loki, I might use a different variation of a combo in order to get to the same end goal. The 2 main combos I want to go over, these are the ones you absolutely have to know, are the safe combo and the aggressive combo. And the reason I term them like that is because the safe combo is more, it plays better through disruption, it can deal with hand traps more effectively, and it allows you to get Regulus set up early rather than later in the combo. On the other hand, the aggressive combo leaves more follow-up in the extra deck, and it burns through less resources. So basically, the choice that you have to make between the safe and aggressive combo is, do I put my opponent on hand traps so I think they'll have interruptions for my plays? And it's sort of just like a read. In some cases, your opponent would just say, hey, I have no interruptions. I don't know. People did it to me at regional, which was completely wild. But if they say that, then yeah, just go for the safe combo, go for the aggressive combo because they're not going to be stopping you. And yeah, so for anyone who's watching this video who doesn't know Sunavalon, don't tell us that you don't have any interruptions because we're going to go for a combo that leaves much better follow-up in the extra deck, right? But in any case, right, I think both of these combos are perfectly valid. The first combo, the aggressive combo I'm going to showcase, is the way that a lot of people were playing this deck or comboing off pre-Power of the Elements. They used to play Mardell, which is a card that I want to talk about later because I think it has a lot more value than most people say, and I'll show why. But in this version of the deck, we're not playing Mardell, just because it's too bricky for long tournaments. But nonetheless, you still want to know both these combos because in some cases, it's pretty clear that they don't have any hand traps. You just put them on no hand traps. You go for the aggressive combo to leave more follow-up. Or if you absolutely need to, you go for or if you feel like, they might be holding something back, then you go for the safe combo in order to make sure that you play around the most. So let's go through these. So you may have heard that Sunavalon is a 1-card combo deck, and that's very true. Pretty much everything you have starts with Loki. But to get the optimal board, and this is true for both of these combos, you actually want to open 2 cards. You want to open Loki, plus you want to open any of your plant combo pieces. So how this works basically is that the full board of 6 interruptions requires you to have, obviously, Loki. If you don't open Loki, you don't do anything. But you also need to open one of these 4, because during your combo, you need to be searching these 4 cards. However, Jasmine, your main searcher, can only be triggered 3 times per turn, which means that there's always one of these cards that you'll need to hard draw. Now, this sounds really unrealistic, right? You're like, hey, it's a 2-card combo, right? It's probably not going to happen, but the reality is these 4. So you need to get all 4 of these cards into rotation somehow. You need your Borea, you need your Mudan, you need your Princess, and you need your Snowdrop, right? So you have 3 searches, you have 4 targets. Of course, we're not playing triple Jasmine because it's not necessary. So you need to have one of these in your hand. But while this might sound unrealistic, 2-card combo, Virtual World, Bricks, if you only draw the Loki, you're still ending on pretty much every interruption except the Rika Sheet. It is a good interruption, but it's the only one that you're going to miss out on if you do not have these. And the second thing is, you actually have like half your deck is substitutes for these 4 cards. So if you don't draw these 4, right, there's so many cards in the deck that just replace them essentially. So like even if you draw the Sheet, that still counts as a substitute for these 4. Or if you draw Lone Fire, or if you draw Laurel, or if you draw Petal, or if you draw the Field Spell, or if you draw pretty much any plant monster in your deck that like is sort of involved in the combo, you're still able to combo off. I did the math on this, and it's like an 85% chance that you're going to draw the extra card that you need. It'll take too long for me to explain exactly why that is, but once you get more familiar with the deck, you'll kind of understand the patterns and why it is that drawing any of these cards allows you to get to the full board. But just know that in almost every game I've played, I've ended on the full board. Very rarely do I have to end on one fewer interruption because I'm not hard drawing one of my combo pieces. So it's not nearly as inconsistent as it seems. That's just something to keep in mind. In any case, so for this demonstration, I'm going to say I opened the Lokai and I opened Princess. These are the 2 cards that we're going to use. I also need a blank discard, just say it's Dark Ruler. Pretty much all of your combos need a blank discard, but of course you're opening with 5 cards in hand, so obviously you have a discard. Sometimes there's like not really that many cards you want. There's a card that you don't really want to discard, but it's very rare. Most of the time you'll have something that you can just pitch for free. You can sequence differently in some cases just to get a discard, but it's not. I'd say like probably 80-90% of the time that's not necessary. So let's start with the aggressive combo. So this is the combo you do if you're either you don't fear God, you don't fear hand traps, or you just know they have no hand traps because they told you, or you put them on no hand traps because they played in a way that seems like they don't have anything. So we're gonna start by normal summoning Loki. This is usually the start of like all of your Sunavalon combos, except when you're going second, or if you're doing like the loop around combo, which I'll talk about later. You're going to make your Dryas, and you're going to trigger the effect of Dryas to grab Sunvine Sowing. You're going to activate Sunvine Sowing, which is going to summon out the twin from the deck. Then you're going to go Chainlink 1 Twin, Chainlink 2 Dryas. So basically, Sunvine Sowing makes you take 1,000 damage, which triggers Dryas to heal 1,000 damage back, and summon a Sunvine monster from the extra deck. Twin is going to bring back the Loki from the graveyard. Usually what you want to go Chainlink 1 Dryas, Chainlink 2 Twin, just because you want to chain block the Dryas. My bad. Sorry. The opposite. Sorry. Chainlink 1 Twin, Chainlink 2 Dryas because you want to chain block the Twin because it summons back from grave, plays around Bell, which is a hand trap that you should be respecting. For the most part, right, Dryas is not something you're too worried about chain blocking. Very rarely are there exceptions. Like if you need to gain life points or you need to be higher than 8,000 life points and you have and they have like an activation negator and for some reason they didn't negate this, then you can chain block this. I think it's come up once for me ever, but normally you go 1 and 2. So you're going to summon out the Sunvine Healer from the extra deck, and you're going to bring back the Sunset Genius Lokai from the graveyard. So now you have your 4 bodies. And this is, again, why Sunvine Sowing is not a starter, right? Because if you don't control this, you're not going to get to all of these bodies. You're just going to summon this out. You're just going to summon this out, and it's not going to do anything. You need the Dryas already on field to bring out the 4 bodies. So now you're going to be linking off these 2, and you're going to make a Aromatherapy Jasmine. So let me just pull that up. Here we are. So Aromatherapy Jasmine. And now for this combo, you're going to use Aromatherapy Jasmine's effect and tribute the Sunset Genius Lokai here for cost. And this is what makes this combo the aggressive version, right? Because one of your most powerful effects is the tribute effect of Jasmine. It gets you to any plant in the deck. You just basically just fire it off. You get to any plant in your deck. A lot of plants have very powerful trigger effects. The thing about this effect is that if they're smart, which most players are not like, they're not going to be very familiar with this deck, but if they're really smart and they hold like an Imperm or Veil to this point, and you use the tribute effect and they stop this from coming out, now you're basically screwed. You're just ending on Bangalancer Pass. You can't get to all of your deck. Your Jasmine is negated. You've gone down 1 body. It's just a really, really bad situation overall, right? So what you really want to be doing is holding up this tribute effect as long as possible and action before that tribute effect comes out. Which is why when I'm playing into like an unknown board, or if I even assume or fear or suspect that they have hand traps, I will always go for the safe combo where you're holding that tribute up until later on, where they're essentially forced to hand trap one of your Jasmines before you go for the tribute effect, right? But here, we're just assuming they either have no hand traps or they've told us they have no hand traps. This version of the deck combo leaves more follow-up in the extra deck. So we're going to summon out the Laurel here, and now we're going to link these two off into a second Jasmine. So now we get to trigger the effect of Laurel here in the graveyard. If it's sent to the grave from anywhere, keep this in mind for later, if it's sent to the grave from anywhere, you gain 500 life points. That will trigger both of Jasmine's effects to search 2 plant monsters from the deck. Basically, this is not once per turn, or it's not hard once per turn, and it basically lets you, whenever you gain life points, to search a plant monster from the deck. So we can do this 3 times per turn. We can trigger these 2, and then later on we can bring back Jasmine and trigger it a 3rd time. So here we already have the Princess, so we're going to be going ahead and adding Borea. This is mandatory at this point in the combo, and the other one we're going to add is just going to be a copy of Snowdrop. So now we want to special summon our Borea out by equipping one of the plant monsters in our graveyard. Now, remember this configuration. So we have a link to here, we have a link to here, and we have one body here. This is an extremely important point in the combo to get to, right? Because once you get to this point, you're able to link climb through Melias and basically get 3 or 4 extra link rating in value and get to the 2 big boss monsters of the deck, right? If you cannot get to this point, then you will never be able to link climb to that part of the combo, right? This is relevant going 1st and 2nd because those link monsters provide you most of your options for outing boards. So Bengal Lancer is a bounce, and Dry Trentier is a tribute and pop, it's like plant access code. But you need to be able to somehow, in some way, get to link to one monster in order to go to that part of the combo, right? So you need to remember this configuration, and this will come up later when we talk about the technical play section and evaluating before you even start your combo, right? Or as the turn develops and they interrupt you, evaluating can I get to this point or not? Because if you can get to this point, then that's really good. But if you cannot get to this point, then that's going to change the way you play, because you don't want to burn resources trying to get to this point when you could be playing the turn completely differently and getting to your boss monsters or accessing your boss monsters differently, right? So remember this configuration, link to any one monster here, right? You want to get to this point pretty much every single time you're doing your combos or playing into a board, right? If you can't, you can still win, it's just going to be different, right? So now we're going to use the effect of Borea to send off our Laurel in order to get the field spell. It's Coliseum. The Coliseum is, of course, going to get us a copy of Regulus. So we're going to get our Coliseum, we're going to get our Regulus to hand, and then we have these 4. So this is the link climb part. We're going to link these 3 off into a copy of Melias. On summon, Melias is going to use its effect in order to bring back a Loki from the graveyard. Now, as you can see, right, we've gone from a link 2 and a 1 body to a link 3 and a body, and we're going to keep link climbing. We're going to summon out a second copy of Melias. For some reason, none of these cards are once per turn, so the second Melias is going to bring back a Loki. Of course, at any point during this, you can just go ahead and summon out your Regulus. Just do it now, honestly, just so you don't forget later. I've forgotten, and it's really unfortunate, but yeah, let's just say we're going to summon out Regulus by equipping Borea here. And now we're going to link this copy of Loki into our Dryas, and Dryas is going to trigger again, and here we're going to get a copy of the Shrine, right? And here's where Shrine becomes relevant, because it enables the triple search combo. Without Shrine, you cannot search 3 times per turn. So let me go ahead and pull up the Shrine here, and now we're going to be activating the Shrine. So we're going to go ahead and play the Shrine out. Let's just put it over here in the spell trap zone by discarding our blank, the Dark Blue, and more. So the next part of this combo is a little bit weird. We're going to use Twin's effect. We're going to banish the Twin, and we're going to also banish the Dryas from the field, because this card says basically you banish a card from you banish a link monster from your field, and you banish itself from the grave in order to resurrect a link monster, but you have to have 2 copies of your grave. So we do have 2 Jasmines, so we can bring one of them back. So we're just going to bring it up over here. And then we'll trigger the effect of Shrine, which is essentially a monster reborn for the Loki. We'll summon it out, and then we'll link this into a copy of Healer. Healer is going to trigger gaining 900 life points, and that's going to trigger our Jasmine because we've reset it to new copy in order to add our 3rd and final card here, which is a copy of Petal. So we want to go for Petal instead of the card that Petal is going to search, because Petal has a floating effect where during the opponent's end phase, it comes back to the field. So you just want to set it up, and it's going to get you to Mudon anyways. So now we're going to use the effect of Snowdrop. So just be aware this card does hard lock you into plants. You don't want to use it. If you use it early, you're kind of locked out of Regulus, which is why we want to summon Regulus early here. We're going to tribute this off. We're going to special summon the Mudon, and we're going to special summon the Petal. Here we're going to use the effect of Petal to grab a copy of Mudon. At this point, you're kind of just going through the motions. You can do these next few steps in any order you want. So let's just say we're going to link these off. We're going to go ahead and make a copy of Dry Trentier. You do want to put the Dry Trentier over here just because the trap card that it gets boosts this guy's attack by all the monsters it points to. So you just want to have all your monsters like under the zones. That way, if they make the mistake of attacking into it, you're just going to one-shot them. Or if it's on your turn and you still have monsters left over, it's just nice to have a bunch of monsters it points to, right? So we're going to grab the trap. We're going to set it. Next, we're going to go ahead and use the effect of Mudon, tributing off the Petal, specialing it out, and grabbing the Rika Field Spell, which is extremely powerful because it allows you, so I'm going to replace the Theron one with the Rika one. We're going to use the effect of the Rika Field Spell to set Rika Sheet from deck, and this is basically your tribute plus Snatch Steal. You're removing 2 bodies from the field. It's an extremely powerful interruption, and because it's a trap, it plays around Dark Ruler. Now you're going to be using these 2 monsters, and here's like a minor mistake. You should most likely be putting these like here. Here is ideal because you want to link these 2 off. You don't want to link this off. You want to link these 2 off into a copy of Bangalancer. So over here, this is a very minor thing. You just want this to have this in the middle zone, just so like it points to the most stuff. And then finally, you're going to special summon out your Princess from hand. So now you have a choice to make. So the effect of Snowdrop basically says you target a plant monster in the field, and you can make all plant monsters you control the same level as it. So if you came here in the deck profile, you'll see that we play 1 copy of the rank 4 and 1 copy of the rank 8. So the rank 4 here floats into the rank 8. It also lets you cycle a card. You can either choose here, because you have a 4 and an 8 on board, you can make these both level 8 or level 4. So there's benefits and downsides to both. If you make the rank 8, you have 3 monsters on the field, and if you get slapped by Dark Ruler, you're going to be losing 3 of those interruptions right away. Nothing you can really do about it. However, the nice thing about going into the rank 8 is that the rank 4 floats into the rank 8, and it floats into the rank 8 from anywhere, including the graveyard. So let's say this goes to the grave. Next turn, on the crackback, you can make the rank 4, and then you can tribute it off and float into the rank 8 for another interruption. And of course, you also get the recycling, which is very relevant. On the other hand, if you go for the rank 4, you'll basically be gone with this. Like, this is done. You're not going to be using this. It's going to be a one-shot, 1 tribute, that's it. But by detaching a material, you can recycle a card, and you play much better around Dark Ruler, because if you get Dark Ruler, the only interruptions you're losing are the Regulus and the Bangalancer. This is a staggered interruption, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be using Princess Effect from Graveyard, tributing a plant monster for cost, and putting it back into the deck to negate a monster effect. Then on resolution, this card is going to float into the rank 8 from the extra deck, so you are not going to be affected by Dark Ruler on your Teardrop. Right? So just think about the board states. Usually in game 1, it's generally safer to go for this because, yes, some people might be on main deck Dark Ruler, but not everyone's going to be, and like you can kind of bet that they're not going to be playing those board breakers. Like in game 2 and 3, I'd almost always go for this, unless I anticipate like a super grindy matchup, which most matchups are not because this deck is like really, really fast. Like I'm almost always going for the rank 4 in post side just because I expect people will have those board breakers, and you can actually punish them. Like if they sphere mode or they Lava Golem you, they don't read this card, they tribute it, and this card triggers off any tribute. So like if they Lava Golem this, you can just float into the rank 8, and that's really funny. But yeah, that's the safe combo. You're getting to this end board. You have 6 interruptions. It's an extremely powerful end board. It's difficult to break even with board breakers. It's immune to any one board breaker because you have an Omni Negate. You have back row. You have Negate in the graveyard. You have like monster effects. Even 2 board breakers are not destroying the board. During one of my matches against Tier Element, he dropped Sphere Mode on me, tributing these 3 monsters, which is correct. And I was still able to hold the rest of my board and then kill him on the crackback. So you can see like just how powerful this board is, even against like big, impactful board breakers, right? So yeah, that's the aggressive combo. So next we'll look at the safer combo. So this is the one that burns through a lot more resources. Sorry, before I clean up, I should just quickly mention, like, so here's what you have left in the extra deck after all this. You have a copy of Dryas, you have a copy of her, Pione, and you have a copy of Thrasher. So this is actually like pretty relevant because you have a link 2, you have a link 1, which you can bring back. You can like if your extra monster zone gets cleared for whatever reason, you can shrine bring back Loki, summon this, search another sewing, and then you have Thrasher, which is your big OTK card. So having these 3 is like a pretty decent amount of follow up. If you don't go for the triple search combo, for example, if you only need 2 searches in order to resolve your full combo, you'll also have a copy of Healer left over. And you'll have a copy. You'll have your Sunseed Twin left in the grave because you didn't use it to resolve another search. Which means on the crackback, you can go ahead and resurrect one of your Melias, and then bring out the Thrasher next to Melias, which is going to give it 3200 attack and an extra attack, right? So that's usually enough follow-up to end the game. So let's now look at the safe combo. So this is the combo that's going to burn through almost your entire extra deck. Yes, it's kind of all in, but even if your board gets like pseudo broken with this combo, you still have like some follow up from your main deck as well as your Bangalancer coming back. Usually past turn 3, like if they break your board, get rid of your resources, and you go past turn 3, then yeah, you're pretty much screwed. But you still have like a decent turn 3, even with very few cards in the extra deck, because of the ability to recycle with the Strenna, as well as the fact that cards like the Field Spell and Bangalancer are coming back to kind of pressure them. And usually, like breaking a board like this takes a lot of resources from the opponent. So what you're kind of fighting back against is not going to be a full board, which makes this a lot. It makes it a lot easier to deal with, even if the majority of your board gets broken. So let's look at the safe combo. I'm just going to clean everything up and redo. So for this combo, we're going to be looking at opening with Borea and we're going to be looking at opening with a Borea and Floki. So you don't actually need to open Borea to do this combo, but if you open with Borea, you have to do this combo because you want to have the Borea up early in order to play around cards like Nibiru. This deck can play around Nibiru, plays around Nibiru pretty decently, but you do need to hard open certain cards, and Borea is one of those cards. So opening Borea, you almost always are going to be trying to set up Borea early, even if they negate it with like an Ash or something, or like a DD Crow banishing your target. That's still fine because you're at least trading with one hand trap, and you haven't done your full combo yet. But let's say for example they open like a Nib or any like one hand trap, right? So we're going to be opening with these two, right? And because we open these two, we want to set up the Borea early. And because we want to set up the Borea early, we have to go for the safe combo. So I'll just explain how it goes, and I'll show you why this combo is safer in terms of protecting your choke points. So as before, right, we're just going to start by normally playing Loki. We're going to link into Dryas, and we're going to use the effect of Dryas in order to grab Sunbind Sowing. But we're not going to activate Sunbind Sowing right away. So instead of that, we're going to bring out the Borea, right? So let's go ahead and bring out the Borea here. Start something out by equipping the Loki. We use the effect of Borea. Here we're going to tribute itself, and we're not going to be tributing. The Loki just because we want to get this in the graveyard early because you need to equip it for Regulus. So let's go ahead and grab the copy of just Colosseum. But what you'll notice here is that we're down one body, right? And in the previous combo, we needed that body to get to the Jasmine, and the extra body, right? That was the Borea. So how are we going to get there without having that extra body? So let's grab this Colosseum, we're going to grab the Regulus, and we're just going to immediately summon out Regulus by equipping Borea here, just to have that protection from your hand trap. So now you're insulated from one hand trap, or even if this doesn't come out, you've gotten one hand trap. If you have another hand trap and you don't have a way to play around it, then that's just unlucky, like especially with Nib. But now we're going to be activating Sunbind Sowing, and we're going to summon out, as before, the Sunseed Twin. So just like in the previous combo, we're going to go Chainlink 1 Twin, Chainlink 2 Dryas, but here we're going to do we're going to have our first difference, right? So instead of summoning out the healer, we're actually going to be summoning out the Thrasher from the extra deck. Now, if you have another combo piece, let's say for example you drew like a Snow Princess, or you drew a Snowdrop or something like that, right? Then you don't need to. You can still go for the healer. The question of whether you summon out a healer or a Thrasher here is about how many searches you need to resolve this turn. If you only need 2 searches to resolve the full combo, then you're going to be bringing out healer. But if you need 3 searches, and in this case, we know that we need 3 searches because we still need to get to Princess, we need to get to Petal, and we need to get to Mudan, with no hearts in hand, obviously. Because we need those 3 searches, we're going to be summoning out the Thrasher because we need both healers in the extract in order to resolve our 3 searches. So as you can see immediately already, we've lost our going second OTK card. This is what makes the combo slightly more resource intensive than the other one, and we're going to summon out this back. So here we're going to link these 2 off into Jasmine. This is very important. You must link off the 2 link monsters. You cannot link off either of these because you need both of them on the field. Because here we're going to be linking off the Twin into a Dryas. Just be aware, this is another big important thing. Dryas takes any level 4 or plant monster, does not have to be Loki, but it only gets its effect as Search if you summon it with Loki in the extra monster zone. The other effect, which comes up later, that is live no matter what. And then we're going to link this off into a healer. So healer is going to trigger targeting the Dryas, and then Jasmine is going to trigger the search. And for first search, we're going to go ahead and grab a copy of Aurora Mage Laurel. So this is the extra body that we need in order to resolve the full combo, right? Because the second effect of Laurel says that if you have higher life points than your opponent, which you do because you've just gained 300 life points, you can go ahead and special that for free. So now we have our 4 bodies just like we did before. So now we're going to be linking all of these two into our second Jasmine. The effect of Laurel will trigger to gain life points, and then our second Jasmine will trigger. This one will not because we've already used it this turn. And here we're going to be grabbing, it doesn't really matter. In this case, I would say the safest card to grab is probably just Mudan, because if the next part of your combo gets negated, then at least you still have Mudan in hand to make plays with. So here, as you can see, we put up a bunch of points of interactions. We've searched 2 plant monsters, and we've still held up the tribute of the Dryas, right? If your opponent's trying to interact, unless they have like diamond hands and like they have like big brain knowledge, they're not going to be waiting all the way until now to negate. And of course, we also have this as well, right? So we have like, it's very unlikely. We have this to protect our interruption, but like, for example, if they have like a second interruption, it's very unlikely that they would have held it till this point. It's most likely you trigger this search like, oh damn, this is just any plan in the deck, negate, right? Just stop that right away. And if they do negate this, right, then it's not that bad because you just take this and you just like link these two off into a second, your second Jasmine over here, and you still have something to tribute, right? So this combo is much safer because you get to resolve your searches. Most likely they'll be trying to negate the searches, which leaves you with additional follow-up no matter what. And even if they hold to this point, you still have Mudan. Like, let's say that they held somehow, like they were just insane diamond hand. You tribute this, and then they negate it. Well, you still have Mudan to grab the field spell, so you're still in like a decent position. But in any case, so here we're going to tribute off the Dryas, and we're going to go ahead and grab a copy of Petal. So we want to bring up Petal just to get it into rotation so that it'll float during the end phase. The effect of Petal will trigger. We're going to go ahead and grab a Snowdrop from the deck, or sorry, not trigger. This is an ignition effect, not a trigger effect, just to be clear. It's once during the main phase. So we have 2 plants here. We have the Snowdrop, we have the Mudan, and now as you can see, we're in the same position, right? We have the link for the one body, so we can go ahead and link these off, make this, and at this point the combo is essentially exactly the same. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, right? We'll just go through this, to this, to this, and then just go through everything, right? But just keep in mind, right, when you do this combo, you are going through every monster in your extra deck except Q&A, because you're going through the Link 4, you're going through the healer, second healer, you're going through this, you're going through these two. So we don't have a Thrasher left. All we have here, we don't have a third Dryas because we've gone through the third Dryas. So all we have left is this card. Now, Strenna can be follow-up. You can, for example, target your Thrasher and put it back in extra, or you can target something like Mudan and put it back in extra. But this combo is more resource intensive than the other combo, and because of that, right, you may have a bit more of a difficult time on the crackback since you'll have very, very few resources left. But usually they're just not breaking the board, and if they do, they're kind of leaving half the board up, so you'll still be able to do something. I do recommend putting back either a Thrasher or putting a Mudan in your hand or something like that, just to have some sort of follow-up. Or you can, like, if you like have to use this negate, you can grab like a Boya back as well. All of those are fine. So that's the save combo, the one that puts up more points of interaction early on and allows you to hold up the Tribute of Jasmine, which is something you want to be doing whether you go first or second. Don't use this lightly, because getting to any plant in your deck and just summoning it out for free is an extremely powerful effect. And it also tributes any monster. So you being able to, for example, tribute a non-plant monster, maybe something you took with talents or like a nib, is really, really powerful, because other than that effect, your deck has absolutely no way to interact with non-plant monsters. If you have a non-plant monster in your field, it doesn't do anything, it's just blank, except for that Jasmine Tribute effect. So you absolutely need to have be aware of when and how you're using it. In any case, so let me just clean up again. So now we're going to be looking at the third combo, and this one's a little bit more awkward, but it's also, in my opinion, one of the most important combos you need to know for this deck, because it allows you to play out many more hands than you normally would, and it's incredible in situations where you're playing around interruptions. So I call this the loop around combo, but really what you're doing is you're just getting into Dryas combo without opening the Loki. And you can do this, right? And it's really important because obviously you're not going to open Loki every single game. So it makes your non-Loki hands much more playable than they otherwise would be. So let me just clean everything up here, pack it all up. Okay, so let's say hypothetically we open the following hand. We opened with Princess. We opened with Borea, and we opened with if I can find her. Where's Primula? Primula. Yeah, okay. We open with these three cards, so this is our starting hand. This looks kind of whack. Of course, if you're like part of the Sunavalon Discord, or if you've played the deck for a while, you probably already know what to do here. But those of you who are learning the deck or are new, you may not see it, obviously. So this hand can still get us to the full combo. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to start by normal summoning any level 4 plan. In this case, we want to summon Primula because these two are special summon extenders, and we need special summon extenders in order to make this combo work. We're going to link this off into the Dryas. Of course, it's not going to get the effect because it's not made with Sunseed Genius Loci. Next, we're going to be special summoning out this by clicking the Primula. We'll use the effective Primula, effective this, grab the field spell to add the Regulus. Again, this can be any extender. There's different ways you can get to this. For example, sometimes you might open Shrine plus like a normal summon. The only exception is you can't start with Sunbind Sowing because this combo does require you to have Sunbind Sowing still available to you later on. So if you can get 3 bodies, so if you can get to this through any means except Sunbind Sowing, you're in a good position. So we've got the Regulus. Now we link into a copy of Jasmine. Now this is another really important point to remember. So just like how you have the link 2 plus 1 body here to get into the Sunavalon part, right, the 2 link 4s, here, this is something to remember to get to pretty much Sunavalon combo from any position, which is Jasmine plus 1 body. This is 3 bodies. 2 of them need to be plants, 1 of them can be anything, right? So again, look at this board state. So we have Jasmine, and we have a monster that Jasmine points to. Again, any monster, if you're really down bad, you can even summon Regulus, equip this, and that's technically 3 bodies. It feels really, really bad to do this just because, like, if you tribute this off and they have another hand trap, you just instantly lose because you have no resources left. But, like, if you, like, look at the hand or look at some kind of talents, you know what they have, then sometimes you do need to tribute the Regulus. Again, this is not something I would do unless you're, like, down bad to get the combo. Here, right, in this position, so we have Jasmine plus we have Tribute. Whether you're going for second, this position will always get you to full Sunavalon combo. This is extremely important to remember because when you're playing into boards, you will very frequently be basically identifying the win condition of playing through the interruptions and then getting to this position, right? You can try as, like, basically play out your hand, do as much as you can to bait, and in the end, make sure that you have access to 3 bodies. It's not always possible, but whenever you can, you want to be in this position by the end of all of their interruptions, because now you're going to use the effective Jasmine to tribute, and you're going to summon out a Lone Fire Blossom from the extra deck. From the main deck. Let's just assume at some point we just summon this out, whatever. Next, you're going to use the effect on Lone Fire Blossom. You're going to tribute the Jasmine. And Lone Fire actually is a secret effect. It can tribute any monster, not just itself. Everyone, you might be familiar with like plant format or like all those like old formats where you're just tributing itself to get more copies of it. Here, you're not doing that. You are tributing your monster over here in order to bring out a copy of Sunseed Genius Loci. So now we've freed up the extra monster zone, and we have a Loki to make into Dryas. So we're going to make the Dryas, and we're going to be grabbing a Sun. We're going to get Dryas, and we're going to be grabbing Sunbind Sowing. Now, you might notice at this point that one of the differences here in comparison to the previous combo is that we've actually used up our Jasmine Negate. Our Jasmine Tribute, rather. So how are you going to play this out? Well, in this case, you need to play a bit differently than you normally would just because you don't have that tribute you don't have access to that tribute. This is not like full combo in the sense that usually you're going to be ending on 1 fewer interruption, generally just a teardrop, but you're still able to get to pretty much everything without the Jasmine Tribute, and I'll show you how. So we're going to be activating our Sunbind Sowing, the one we just searched, right? And we're going to be summoning out our bodies here. So here, again, you have that choice to make, right? Do I summon out a healer or do I summon out a Thrasher? So we have 2 healers and 1 Thrasher. The question here is, am I going to search twice more this turn, or am I only going to search once more? And that, again, depends on what other cards you have in your hand. So one thing to remember is that Sunbind Shrine, which is the only way you're going to get to the second search, requires another card in your hand to discard. So if your hand is empty right now, you're not getting to that second search because you will search Shrine with the Dryas and then you'll have nothing to pitch for it, which means that if you have a blank hand, empty hand, you're always going to be summoning Healer in this position because later on in the combo, you're going to get the Shrine, then you're going to realize you have nothing that you can pitch with Shrine. If you know for a fact that you can get to that second search and that second search is going to be worthwhile to get, whether or not you're playing into a board or you're playing going first, and you know like, yes, I want that search, and I'm going to get value out of that search, then here you're going to be summoning a Sunmine Thrasher. Usually, like if you're playing into a board, you're going to be using your battle phase in order to clear things. In the technical play section later on, we'll go over how to use the battle phase. So because of that, Thrasher is less valuable simply just because you're not going to have like access to it to OTK, or like maybe you've dark ruled them. So in most cases, like unless the board is just really weak, in that case you don't need to worry about this. You're just comboing off and going for an OTK line. You know they have nothing. If you're playing into like a difficult board, this is not going to be an OTK on turn 2, so it's okay to use this up, but of course it's still better to hold it back if you can, because later on, right, if you use this up, you'll wish you had it. I'm not perfect with this as well. A lot of times I just end up with a Healer or Master deck which is doing nothing when I could have had a Thrasher. So before you resolve the effective Dryas, think carefully about whether or not you're going to be searching twice more this turn. So in this case, let's say we're only going to be searching once, so we're just going to summon out the Healer, effective Healer to gain life points. And of course, we're going to be using the effective twin to bring back the something here. So at this point, you actually want to watch the position of your monsters. Okay, so here, the best thing to do is to have the Loki in one of these two zones, because when we make our next Jasmine, we're going to want to have this zone, both of these zones clear, or at least one of these zones clear, just because we want to resolve the effect to was Melias to bring this card back into an empty zone to make our second Healer. But in this case, you now have two options that you can do. So here we're going to be making a Melias, because we want the Melias to summon out the Loki to make another Healer to search and link line. But before you make the Melias, you can make a Peony for free here. And the reason that you would attempt to make the Peony here, so let's say like we probably go like, so if this is here, here, and here, right? We'd probably just go ahead and link these two off into the Peony. So the reason that you would consider making a Peony here is very simple, right? It's because you might be able to get value out of this card, right? We're going to a link 3 anyways. We don't really care about, so we don't really care here about the situation, right? So we don't really, obviously, like we're going to a link 3 anyways, so this link 2 is just basically like something free to just kind of throw away. But it has the potential of getting you extra value, and unlikely as it is, there's a possibility your opponent might still have interaction. Like that's not really a consideration, but you can mill like really good cards with this Peony here, or you can mill really terrible cards, and it's just completely like a gamble on whether or not you mill well or you mill poorly, right? Because if you mill well, you can get like really nice cards like Mudan, which are going to get you additional value. If you mill poorly, you can dump cards like Sunmine Shrine, or you can dump cards like the Trap card, or you can dump cards like the Field Spell, which is going to screw you over later in the combo, right? So again, this is a completely situational decision of whether or not you want to go for this or not. Personally, I'm not a huge fan. Also, the other thing is you probably want to have like, you want to link up everything except like this, just to have like, so that if you summon something out, it's in this zone, so you still keep these zones clear. But, you know, if you're a gambler and you want to go for a higher ceiling, then you can make the Peony here because you're just going to be making the link 3 afterwards anyways. But if you don't want to take the chance of milling important cards and messing up your combo, then you can just go straight into the link 3. So in this case, let's just say we're going to go straight into the link 3. So we have these two over here. Let me put this back. So we're going to have, let me just reset this, sorry. So we'll go make the Jasmine here, just like make these two into Jasmine, our second Jasmine, and then here we're going to go straight into our link 3 Melias, because we're not gamblers and we're not trying to get that higher ceiling by making the Peony. So we're going to make our Melias, and that's going to go ahead and summon out a Loki back to the field. So now we're going to go ahead and link this Loki off into our second copy of Healer, if I can find my second copy of Healer. I might have dumped it by accident. Yes, over here. We're going to summon out Healer. Healer is going to target the Melias. It's going to gain 900. We're going to gain 900 life. Then we're going to use the effect here in order to search a copy of Mudan. Right? Mudan is always the card that we're trying to search here because it's getting us to our field spell, and the field spell gets us to a lot here. So now we're going to go ahead and summon out Mudan by tripping off link 1. You have two options here really. So one of the options is just to go for this, tribute off the link 1, or you can go and start link climbing into this. go into link 3, and then make the Bengal Lancer, and then tribute off the Bengal Lancer from Mudan. If you're going first, I think it's better to go through everything, make the Bengal Lancer, and then tribute Bengal Lancer to summon Mudan, because you're just going to revive the Bengal Lancer. But if you're going second, I would suggest going for the Mudan first. And the reason for that is because Mudan, effective Mudan is going to trigger. We're going to get the Rika Field spell, and then we're going to activate the Rika Field spell, and we're going to be setting Rika Glamour. So this is part of how we're playing through the end of the opponent's board, because we're going to flip the Rika Glamour, and applying the effective field spell, we're going to tribute one of our opponent's monsters in order to grab both of our level 4s. So now we've gotten to the negate of the Princess, and we've gotten Primula, which is going to be a discard fodder for later if we are in fact completely out of cards in our hand. And it's going to let us keep Mudan on the field to make sure that the Princess is live on the following turn. I don't know where my Primula went, but it should be some. It's in the graveyard here. Sorry. So if we specifically started with Primula, then we can't go for both level 4s. Because in my example, we start with Primula and we're out of that pairing. Let's say instead of Primula, we start with something like Laurel. In that case, we'd be able to grab this, and we'd be able to grab the Primula to hand. Just be aware, that was my mistake there. So if you do start with this, you don't have the pairing for it. Instead, I would be, like in this situation, I would be adding the 2 level 8s. So I'd be grabbing a copy of Snowdrop and a copy of Borea. And this will really amount to the same thing. We're just going to be able to get to Teardrop, right? So then we're just from here, we're just going to be going towards like the basic combo. Let's say like we have these 2, we can go effect, tribute, and then we can go link these off, make this, get the shrine, and then the shrine can bring us back a Loki. So I guess we'll just play it out just to kind of show you like what it looks like. So we're going to go, let's say we make Melias. This line is slightly weaker than the previous one just because we don't have access to level 4s. So we're going like this. We can link this off. We're going to go into our 3rd copy of Dryas, effective Dryas to grab Shrine. In this case, so if you are like kind of screwed here and you just don't have another body, then we're just not going to be making this third Melias. Like if you really have like if nothing to discard for Shrine, just out of resources, then we're just going to be overlaying these 2 into a Teardrop, and we're going to be linking these 2 off into a Bengal Lancer. And you still have like a few negates, but if you do have like a discard for Shrine, then you can also get the Dry Trentier. In any case, so this is like the loop around combo, so to speak, right? And it allows you to get into your Sunavalon combo, at least the majority of it, even after going through a lot of your effects, right? Either going through a lot of your effects but not resolving some unsewing, or if you just straight up open without a Sunseed Loci, you're still able to get to like the majority of your board. It's a very important combo to know because you really want to be able to have as much gas as possible and build the strongest board or play through as much as possible, and this combo allows you to do that, right? In the deck profile, I talked about the value of Triple Tactics talent for that very reason, because going second, you're able to pull take a monster to one of Jasmine's zones and then use it to tribute to resolve this combo, even after you've gone through a lot of the board. And obviously, talent itself is a strong card because you're outing problematic monsters on the board, or at the very least, you are forcing a negate. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly go through the 1-card combo. This is assuming you have not opened anything except Loki. And I'm just going to fast forward this because you've already seen the same combo a bunch of times. So we'll just get to the point of the combo where we are searching, right? So in this combo, right, you are trying to search, instead of searching 2 cards, you are searching, 3 cards. You're going, instead of having 4 cards to search, you're going to be searching 3. So you're going to be searching this, you're going to be searching this, and you're going to be searching the Snowdrop, which should be somewhere around here. So these are the 3 cards you're going to be searching in the 1-card combo. This can also be Petal just because you want to get into rotation for follow-up later on. So here are the 3 cards you're going to be searching. You're not going to be searching the Princess. And the reason for this is because once you get to the end of the combo, and let's see, summon these 2 out, right, as you would before, and then you're going to tribute this off from Mudan, get the field spell. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be using this field spell, but instead of setting Sheet, you're going to be setting Glamour. And you're going to activate Glamour, tributing off Mudan in order to add the 2 level 4s. So on resolution, Primula, because a monster is tributed, gets to special summon itself out. Then Princess, because it's just free, gets to special summon itself out. You're going to make the rank 4 here, detach, recycle, and then you're going to be linking this off into the Bengal Lancer and still end on the same board, except you do not have Sheet. set. So this is the one card combo. You're ending on still the Strenna. You're ending on the Regulus. You're ending on the Bengal Lancer. You're ending on the Link 4 with the trap set. You will not have Sheet because off of the Glamour you will have set the off of the Con you will have set Glamour instead of Sheet. So that's just the one card combo and the only difference you're really doing when you decide between those combos. Okay, so now we get to the technical play section. So this is what happens when I need to play into a board or deal with a board, right, or play around interruptions. And this is, I think, the part that's probably the most important if you're already familiar with the deck. Just going over some of those like tips and tricks and essential things to know. So a couple of concepts here. So first of all, one thing you really want to be doing whenever you play this deck, whether you're going first or second, is to put out as many points of interaction as possible. And what that means is just give your opponent opportunities to mess up. Use cards which seem powerful but you don't really care about, or sequence your plays in a way where either you can protect your choke points from interruption, or by playing cards that you honestly don't care about and threaten your opponent because they seem scary to them, because they don't know the deck, because nobody knows the deck. This is true going first and second. So an example of this would be something like if you have Lonefire in your hand, you can summon out a Pione early if you can get to it with your special summons. Use the effect of Pione, and this is a point of interaction that they have to decide whether to deal with. And if they imperm this, which does happen, it's happened online and it's happened in person to me, then just normal summon Lonefire over here, and then you tribute this for cost, make the loci, just keep comboing off for absolute free, right? Lonefire Blossom is a really powerful card. It gets to any plant in the deck, right? But it also removes a body from the extra monster zone. So while it's not the best thing to draw by itself, or like if you have like 4 normal summons, obviously it's trash. It's a really, really, really good card to have alongside like extenders, because it lets you bait things, and at the end of that, just hold your normal summon, drop the Lonefire Blossom, and boom, there you go. The other thing that you need to do in this deck, because it is a very involved and complex combo deck, right, is as you're going through combos, you need to be able to improvise. It's not enough to just memorize it. Here's my 1 card combo, like here's my 2 card combo, that's all. If you're playing into a board, you will never, pretty much ever, resolve the combo the way that you want it to, because they have known and unknown interruptions. The way they play is going to be different depending on the player. They might have hand traps. So what you should be doing is not, trying to force any one combo through, but rather, identifying and changing your win conditions based upon the situation, right? And the best way to do this is something that I like to describe as counting bodies, which means you look at your hand and you think about, how many extenders do I have? How many bodies can I put out onto this field? And what can I get to with those bodies, right? So again, I talked about those 2 configurations that you need to remember, right? The configuration of Jasmine, body, or in some cases, this doesn't even have to be Jasmine body. This can be Jasmine Pione body, which has come up for me as well. Like I've made Pione as the second one over here, Jasmine Pione body. This is the first configuration you need to remember. Like you need to ask yourself, can I get to this point? Because if you can get to this point, then you can get to Bengal Lancer and you can get to Dry-Trentier, right? And getting to these 2 is really powerful because you can use Dry-Trentier's effect, tributing Bengal Lancer, popping 4 cards on the field, then bringing Bengal Lancer back. It can't use its bounce effect this turn, but you're still going to have an interruption for next turn, and you're going to be wiping a huge number of cards on their field, right? So this is like a point that you really want to get to. But, of course, you're not always able to get to it unless you have the proper cards and the proper extenders. The second sort of counting bodies, and this is the one I think that comes up much more often, is can I get to my 3 bodies, my Jasmine plus my 1 tribute? And there are many, many different ways to do this, right? But I would say at the very least, right, identifying this, like getting to this is your win condition when you're playing into a board, right? When you're playing into hand traps, it's a bit different. You're not like super concerned about getting to this specifically. You're more interested in like baiting out interruptions, and like putting them on like, especially things like Valor or Imperm. Like Gamma is obviously different because it removes the body from the field. It's really rough. But for like low impact hand traps like Ash or Imperm, right, or Valor, you're just trying to put out as many points of interaction where they're either forced or tempted to interact with you as possible before essentially just going into your Sunavalon combo at the end. Obviously, sometimes that's not going to happen. Sometimes you're just going to be losing to 1 hand trap. Pretty much every deck does that. It is what it is. But for going second, right, you're trying to identify this is like your main win condition because you're going to get to Sunavalon combo through this configuration. If you have to use sewing early, then it's a little bit rougher because you can't go for like the Lonefire loop summon Dryas thing because you've already used sewing. There are other things you can do there, but that is very game dependent. It's hard for me to discuss. But let's talk about the extenders in the deck. So you have what I would say are probably about 6 extenders. Some of them are more situational than others. Obviously, like something like unexpected die sort of counts as an extender in the sense that you still have your normal summon afterwards, but it's like I'm just gonna pull these out anyways. Just say like this is technically an extender, not like a super extender because you sort of need like another card to go alongside this. But these are like your sort of like pseudo extenders, like a starter extender, and then you have so this sort of this, not really. It's like again another pseudo extender, and I think like that's really about it, unless you count Sunline Sewing. Let's just say like okay, let's count Sunline Sewing as another extender here. So these are the extenders that you really have available to you, right? And you play multiple copies of these, so of course you're probably going to see like 1 or 2 per turn. But there are some that are stronger than the others, right? So let's start with the most powerful extenders in your deck. So you have Lily Boria and you have Princess. These are the most powerful extenders, other than Sunline Sewing, because but Sunline Sewing is more important because it's a combo piece, right? These are just raw extenders. They're essentially costless special summons from hand. And because of that, right, when you need an extra body on field, these two are like the most valuable of your extra bodies, right? So always be aware of these 2 cards and like their current status. Have they been used or have they not been used? Because through Jasmine, you can get access to these cards, right? And you need to know if you still have access to one of them or not, right? If you do not have access to either of these cards, your turn is going to be a lot more difficult. If one of them is still unused, then you still have an extender to play with, right? Don't hesitate to use these though. If you need to use them, you need to use them, even if it puts you in like a slightly more awkward position later. The most important thing is getting to as much as you can, right? Laurel is a sort of pseudo extender because it requires you to have higher life points than your opponent, and some decks that will completely get screwed by like Sword Soul burn you for 1200 long out unlucky. Other decks this is really strong because like especially against sprites, if they start or turn 1, then this is just basically one more of these. And in fact, this is even stronger than both of these because if you link this into a Jasmine, it triggers to heal, and then Jasmine gets a search as well, which is another point of interaction that they have to deal with. So this card can be very strong or it can be useless, but it is another extender to be aware of, and if you draw it, you kind of want to set up or engineer a situation in which this card is going to be useful. This card is awkward to use, but it is an extender. Basically, if a monster is tributed on your side of the field on resolution, you can special summon this out. Most commonly, you'll be using it with Jasmine, where you'll like tribute a monster for cost, and then summon something out, and then on resolution, you get just an extra body. It's not great. It's awkward to use, but it's definitely something you should be aware of because there are situations where this comes up as an extender. These two. So this is, I call this a pseudo extender, just because like it's an extender in the sense that you summon it, then you search the field spell, then you set like the glamour, and then you use the glamour to get an extender. So it's definitely like a more awkward one, but you are getting like in the end you're getting at least 1 extra body from this if you set the glamour, because you can set this, you can search the 2 level 4s, one of them is special out for free, the other one you can maybe special out later, right? But this is the card that you really want to resolve, right? Because this is the only way you're getting the field spell, and the field spell is the main way that you're cracking boards by kind of tributing and removing your opponent's monsters. So it's not great to go for this early, especially if you know that they already have interaction, because if this gets negated, you're in a rough spot, and your end board and like your setup is going to be much weaker just because you don't have access to the field spell. So this is a little kind of like tougher of an extender. This one is another extender. It's always net +1 because what it does is you tribute a plant monster, then you summon itself plus another plant monster from the hand. So now you go 2 for 1. The only thing you have to be careful about is this card is also your level modification, right? It goes to level 4, level 8, and when you're playing into a board or trying to clear a board, you really want to go into Teardrop because Teardrop just removes the body from the field, right? Very powerful. It also tributes instead of destroys, so like it gets around that kind of stuff. Which means that it's not like great to use this as link material, because if you use this as link material, it just makes it a lot harder, if not impossible, to get to Teardrop. And not getting to Teardrop means that it's just like a rougher situation to kind of clear the whole board, right? So just be very careful and conservative when using this as link material. You want to set up a situation in which you can overlay this or modify like another level on the field to overlay with this, just because it's most powerful when used for one of the XC monsters. And finally, Glamour, right? This card, again, is a very powerful extender. If you add any Rika from deck to hand, and then if you tributed a monster, you get to add another plant monster at the same level. Pretty much all the pairings of like level 8, level 4, level 1 come up, like these 2 level 4s, these 2 level 8s, and then the level 1 Petal and the level 1 Loki. But of course, don't hesitate to use this to just search one monster. It's not always, and not even like, I would say like probably like 60 to 70% of the time it's correct to search 2, but sometimes you just need to search 1. Like sometimes you need to grab your Princess, or sometimes you need to grab your Snowdrop. Don't hesitate to search this, search 1 with this, right? it really is just completely fine to get value out of the card by getting the one monster that you need. And it's much less prone to Ash when you add one, because they're like, oh, cool, they add one monster, whatever. There's probably more important stuff. But when you tribute a monster on your field and then say you're going to add two, like no one in the universe is not going to Ash that because you're getting so much value out of resolving it, and if they Ash it, they're getting value. You've basically just gone -2, right? So if you do the tribute effect, you're just getting 100% Ash. Like there's no universe in which you're not getting Ash. Whereas if you just play this like raw and then add one monster, I feel like most people are probably not getting Ashes. Like whatever, one monster, cool, it is what it is, right? And if you add, then you add like Snowdrop and then you like sack them because you just like special out like a Lone Fire from hand or something, or special out like a Petal from hand, right? So yeah, definitely don't hesitate to use this as a search one. And especially like if you're playing into, like hand trap or like you can't afford to lose a body on field because it does tribute for cost. It can be correct to search one instead of searching two. So the reason I'm talking about all these extenders is because as you're playing out your turn, you need to be thinking about how you're going to get to your like win condition. Like how am I going to use whatever extenders I have in hand in order to get to the position of either the Jasmine plus one tribute, or like after that, how am I going to be using these extenders to get to this position, right? And you need to be constantly thinking about or evaluating your hand and asking yourself, like, can I get to Jasmine plus tribute? Can I get to the 2 links plus the 1 body, right? Because if you can't, then you're going to be playing your turn completely differently. Like, for example, you might choose the tribute, like if you have like this and then you've already used your tribute, let's say like you're now sitting on something like this, right? Then you might choose to use Snowdrop to tribute this to summon 2 bodies in order to make a Bengal Lancer and a Teardrop instead of trying to get to the 2 link 4s, right? If you attempt to get to those 2 link 4s, like try to force it, right? In some cases, you're going to end up with a worse board than before. Like for example, right, if you do have enough bodies to get to this position, but you have to use up every single one of your Rika extenders, then you're not going to be ending on any Rikas, which means that your Princess in the Grave is going to be live on the dead on the next turn. And with the field spell up, this shuffling back into the deck and tributing a monster your opponent controls is one of your strongest interruptions. So maybe it's better not to go for that, or maybe it's better to just go for Teardrop Bengal Lancer, swing into the monsters, and then have a Rika up to set this up later on, right? So all of those things are the things you need to be thinking about as you're comboing, and when you're adapting on the fly, you need to be considering like what can I get to, right? Which of these positions like can I get to, and is it going to be too resource intensive, and is it going to burn through my whole extra deck for like no reward, or is it actually going to help me set up the strongest board in order to win, right? So yeah, that's kind of like just evaluating the board, so counting bodies and looking at your hand, thinking about what you can get to from what you have. So the next thing is battle phase, right? The battle phase is an extremely important part of this deck, right? I think I mentioned this in the deck profile as well, but basically a big part of like the technical play of this deck is about the battle phase, right? Just because when you go into the battle phase, you need to make the best use possible of Dryas's effect. So you already know how important it is to have the right number of bodies. And oftentimes, right, your power spells like Sunbind Sowing, or something like Rika Glamour may not resolve the way that you want it to, or maybe it won't resolve at all, right? And the only way that you're going to get to the position you want to is through Dryas, right? Because Dryas's effect actually has a second effect, and it reads the following. So once per turn, if you take battle or effect damage, you can gain that much LP, and if you do, special summon 1 Sunbind monster from your extra deck. So the effect damage, obviously, that comes from Sunbind Sowing, but the battle damage is where this becomes extremely relevant, because what you can do is you can go into battle phase, you can crash the Dryas into a defense position monster, take the damage, heal it back, and then summon a Sunbind from the extra deck. In the worst case, that is netting you 1 extra body. If you're really down bad or you're desperate, you need that 1 extra body, you can do that. However, there are situations where you can set up a much more powerful play. This is true especially like if you're playing into something like Sprite, or even something like Q Element, where they have trouble interacting with you during the damage step, and especially they're not really understanding kind of the point or the purpose of what you're doing. Like when you go into battle phase and you run into something in Dryas, a lot of people, especially the first or second time they play against the deck, are going to be like, WTF, why are you crashing this random 0 effect tech monster? This is the optimal situation that you want to engineer for yourself if you cannot resolve something like Sowing, or you cannot get to a good position with your power spells, right? Yes, we already have our 3 bodies here, right? But we're not triggering the effect to tribute Dryas. Instead, we're just going to have our Jasmine here and our Dryas here, and we're going to enter into the battle phase. So we're going to be ramming our Dryas into the opponent's monster. Now, if you have, for example, a Sunbind Sowing in the graveyard, or if you have the Therion Field Spell up, you can even crash this into an attack position monster. Like, let's say like this got negated, or like this was ashed or something. You can even crash this into an attack position monster, because either the Therion Field Spell or the Sunbind Sowing will allow you to protect your Dryas from battle, even when you're going into an attack position monster by banishing it from the grave. But in this situation, what's going to happen is you're going to run into the monster, attack or defense, and then during the damage step, this is going to trigger, and it's going to allow you to summon out. You're going to take the damage, you're going to heal it back, and then you're going to summon out a healer from the extra deck to Jasmine's other zone. And healer is going to target Dryas, you're going to gain 300, and then this is going to trigger to let you search. Now, all of this is happening during the damage step. I think this is especially relevant versus Sprite, because oftentimes you're getting to this point after you play through the Toad Negates. They might still have a red up. And red cannot interact with this in any way, because red negates effects and not activations. So if you get to this point against Sprite and they have a red, what you've basically done is you've just gone +2. You've got an extra body to make your plays, and you've gotten a free search either to bait out the red or to just do more stuff, right? So for example, like you can grab a Laurel and then you can summon out the Laurel, and if they negate that, then that's cool, effect tribute. If they don't, then you grab Laurel, summon it out, you make another Jasmine, effect a Jasmine, a search. Then now like, oh, are they going to negate? No, okay, cool. We just get a free another plus. Are they going to negate? Okay, cool, effect tribute, right? So being able to get to this specific position of Jasmine and EMC Dryas under is a really, really good position to be in. And you can do this in a lot of ways. For example, even if you resolve a partial Sunbind Sowing, let's say you make the Dryas, and then they negate the Dryas effect. Now you activate Sunbind Sowing. You can't summon out your Sunbind from this, right, because it's negated, but you can still bring out the Twin. So let's say, for example, this comes out, you bring out the Twin, and Twin is going to resurrect this. So now you're in this position, right? Now you can just make these two into the Jasmine, make this into a second Dryas, and you're in this position already, even if you only have the 3 bodies, right? I can't emphasize enough just how important having 3 bodies is with this deck. It gets you to really everything, right? And this is just one of those things that is really, really important. Just keep in mind though, for this, you do need to do this though. You do need 3 plant bodies. Like if you triple tactics and you take something, then that's not enough to get to this, because this requires 2 plants, requires 1 level 4 lower plant. So you need 3 plant bodies to get this position. But this is definitely something that you need to know in order to use or exploit the battle phase effectively. Even Dryas itself is something that you can do. Like, for example, I play Lava Golem in my side deck. It's a little bit sussy, but I think it's a card that's just pretty decent, because you don't necessarily have to start with normal summon Loki search sowing. Of course, there's like special summon and then activate sowing, or just hard activate sowing. But then there's stuff like, you can just special out a princess. You can make the Loki, and then you can just, or the Dryas rather, you can just run into the monster. And then you can heal back, get an extra body, and now you just need 1 more extender, and you are golden. Even if you don't have another extender, you can go into like the Peony. So that sort of stuff, taking advantage of the battle phase and using the battle phase effectively in order to get the most resources is a really important part of this deck as well. Just remember, Dryas effect to heal and then summon is like a really, really, really important part of playing into boards. And the kind of condition that you should be going for is either going for Jasmine plus Dryas like this, or if you're down bad and you've kind of used all your resources, then just any 3 bodies, right? Basically, like it could be like this, but it could just be like, for example, it might look something like this. It might look something like this, or like this, and this, right? This is also like a configuration that works, because then you just link these 2 off into Jasmine, and then you just go effect tribute, and then you keep going, right? So that's like something that's, I would say, probably one of the more technical parts of the deck is effectively utilizing the battle phase, and then effectively engineering a situation in which you can get to the battle phase in that position. I can't really like go through anything more specific than that. It's just really about evaluating the game state and understanding like how your opponent's going to use their interruptions, and how that's going to affect your own board and your own plays. Like everything other than that is just experience and playing the deck more. But that's just those are sort of like the goals that you want to reach. Like identify like where you need to go and how you're going to get there, right? So let me quickly check. I have some notes here. One moment. Okay, right. So next is siding patterns. So let's go over siding patterns for this deck. So under normal circumstances, I think the siding pattern is somewhat straightforward. However, there is one thing that you really have to be aware of as you're doing your siding, and it's something that I learned more the more I played online. So this didn't come up in regional. I didn't really think about this at all, but as I played more online, and especially as I played into decks that have strong follow-up, I realized that this is actually a lot more important than I first gave it credit for. So the main thing about this deck is that you realistically only have 6 interruptions, that is quick effects, in the entire deck. So I'm just going to go through all 6 of them. Sorry, I'm just going to have a notification. I'll close real quick. So I'm going to go through all 6 of the interruptions. For monster interruptions, you have the following. You have Bengal Lancer, you have Teardrop, and you have Regulus. For spell trap interruptions, you have Sheet and you have Bloom. And for your graveyard interruption, or like your other monster effect interruption, you have Rika Princess. You have absolutely no other interaction with your opponent other than these 6, unless you play a bunch of hand traps, in which case, you're in a lot better of a spot. But if you're playing a build with either fewer hand traps, or you just didn't open any hand traps, these 6 are the only interruptions that your deck can put out. So, the problem with this is that 3 of these interruptions are bricky going second. Sheet is bricky going second, Bloom is really, really bricky going second, and even Regulus is somewhat bricky going second. The conventional siding pattern for this deck is to remove all 3 of these cards. You don't want Sheet, you don't want Bloom, you don't want Regulus, because drawing these cards is really bad playing into a big board. The problem is that there are decks out there that can make a big board, they can make like a decent enough board, but also have like 3 or 4 cards for follow-up. Decks like Mathnet can do that. Sometimes Sprite tends to be a little bit more all-in, but if they play correctly and they just add their starter, plus they have like Ronin Totem, plus they have like your normal summon, if they top like something else, those decks tend to have a solid amount of follow-up. And oftentimes, you're going to be clearing the board just because we just talked about the importance of the battle phase to this deck, right? You need to use your battle phase very frequently to clear the board, which means that even if you wipe their entire board, but you don't kill them, which is very, very common, you need to set up your own board. And the best board you can manage after setting these 3 out is going to be Teardrop, Bengal Lancer, and Princess. And against decks with a lot of follow-up, this is not always going to be enough. Which means, right, if you're playing into a deck that you know is most likely going to be follow-up focused, or is going to be setting up like a decent board with a lot of follow-up, it might be a good idea to keep some cards in. So for example, we may choose to keep both of these cards in because it means the end board is going to be a lot stronger. 4 interruptions is better than 3, and 5 interruptions is better than 4. So these 3 interruptions may not be enough all the time. On the other hand, if you know that you are going to need as many going second cards as possible to push through the board, then these 3 are an easy side out, right? So you do want to side these 3 out, but just think about whether or not, if you take these out, your end board is going to be strong enough in order to deal with what they put out after you've broken their board on the crackback. So that's the first thing. But generally speaking, my siding pattern is like this. I'll side out for the Ethereum package. I'll be siding out these 4 cards. So I'll be siding 1 Borea, 1 King. I keep in 2 copies of King, 2 copies of Borea and 1 copy of Disco. Now, this is a little bit controversial. So I think some people will say like this is not, you shouldn't do this. But the reason I choose to do this specifically is because I think that number 1, Borea is not a bad draw. It's a good card to, unlike Regulus, it's a really good card to draw. And secondly, the reason I keep the field spell in is twofold. Number 1, as I mentioned before, the field spell can protect Dryads from battle, so it has a minor utility there. But the other reason is because I want to give Borea a search target. So the opponent, unlike you, does not know that you've sided out your Regulus. And the thing about a lot of players, this is not going to work against the best of the best players, but the majority of players you're going to encounter, even at like a regional level, are not thinking super deeply when they interact. What they're thinking is, oh, he summoned a Borea. I know what Borea does. It adds field spell. What does the field spell do? It adds Regulus. They're not thinking about the details or the logistics of how you're going to get that Regulus onto the field. What they're thinking is, I need to stop my opponent from getting to an Omni Negate, which means that if you are able to activate the effect of Borea, it's very likely that they will try to interact with that Borea because they think, like, Borea gets the field spell gets to Regulus. So they're going to try to stop the Borea, and that's free because you know, they don't, that all you're going to be doing is adding field spell, add another Borea, which is kind of pointless, but you want to have that option. And of course, just field spell activating and grabbing Borea is just nice to have an extra extender. We already mentioned, this is one of your freest extenders in the deck. You just special summon it out for free. So just grabbing a Borea is not bad. And if they decide to ash this for whatever reason, which people will do, that's just a completely free interaction that you've fiended out for pretty much no cost, right? I mean, you can even still get to the Borea later on if you use the effect to protect and then add back the Borea. There's stuff you can do with this field spell that doesn't involve searching. So for that reason, I want to have 2 copies of Borea, because I can open Borea, I can add field spell, effective field spell, and field spell can get the second Borea. So that's the reason why I keep these 3 cards in the deck. But you can choose to even cite these out if you want. You definitely want to keep in at least 1 copy of this, just because it's an extender, and also because it pairs with Snowdrop for Glamour. But I think this works out very well for me. If you feel like you need this, then you can also keep this in. I'll probably set out 1 copy of this and just have these 4 in the deck. You could even keep the whole package in if you really wanted, but it's just like there's a lot of stuff you want to side out, so I tend to just decide like, hey, this is 1 card that we need to get rid of. You're always setting out Bloom unless you're playing against a hard Towers deck, just because this card is like disgustingly bad to draw. If you draw it, you're hard punished. It does nothing. So slide this out no matter what. This card is like before, like this stuff. This card is very powerful, and it kind of sucks to side it out, but if you draw it, you're punished, so you just don't really want to draw it, because of that, you side it out. Unless you really think like you need this as an additional interruption, or like the game's going to go long. If the game's going to go long, then you keep this in because it's another option to set, and you're not really scared of being OTK'd, or you're not scared of just your opponent killing you in like 1 or 2 turns. So yeah, that's my main siding pattern. So these are like these 4. And then everything else after this, it depends on the matchup. Like if I'm setting up multiple cards, if I'm going second against a combo deck, where I think that Lava Golem is not good, or board breakers are not, or it's not very helpful, I will usually set out stuff like this or this. I don't really like setting out Engine, or sometimes like I'll set out like a Lone Fire instead, or like a Lone Fire and Sowing. I don't really like setting out too many extenders, but I think like setting out 1 or 2 is fine, like maybe 1 sword or 1 extender. If I'm siding out in Lava Golem, I will never side out any of the special summon cards. I'll never side out this, I'll never side out this. Just because you need as many special summons as you can get, so you don't have like a weird like dead hand where you have Lava Golem and nothing else, and then you're just not able to play because your hand is full of normal summons. So that's usually my siding pattern. For going first, it's very simple. I just take out 3 Dark Rose and put in 3 Point of the Red Lotus. That's the only going first card I'm playing anyways. If I have like hand traps that don't matter, or like they're just bad against the deck, I might put in something like Nib, or I might put in Crow or something over the Ogre. But realistically, it's just these 3 cards become 3 Pointer. Pointer is a disgustingly powerful card, so it's a very, very easy going first siding pattern. So that's basically really it for the siding. The only thing to really think about is how many interruptions do you want to take out of your main deck, right? Because remember, you only have 6, and if you feel like your opponent is going to be able to play through 3 on the crackback, then it may be a good idea to keep 1 in. I would say the first to keep in is just the Regulus. It's a monster. It's easy to get to. It also pressures the board. This is probably the one that you you choose to keep in going second the most. So anyways, that is the siding pattern. So finally, the last thing to talk about, this is the final part of the video, will be about very minor details and things to remember. So the first thing I want to go over, and this is a very uncommon situation, but it's very important to understand because you obviously want to play out as many hands as you can, is the fact that Laurel is triggers. I mentioned this earlier as well, but the fact that Laurel triggers being sent from anywhere. It doesn't have to be the hand or the field. It can be literally anywhere. So you can mill it, you can toss it from your hand, you can send it from the field. And because of that, this card allows you to play out hands that under normal circumstances, you would assume you are not able to play out. So let's look at this hand, for example. So we have Laurel, we have Boreal Lily, and oh, we bricked. We drew our Bloom. Unlucky. So most of you who are like familiar with the deck should probably be able to see the line here. But just like if you're newer, or if you're want a puzzle here, look at this hand and tell me how can you full combo with this hand. Okay, so let's look at this. So there's 2 things you need to know here in order to be able to full combo with this hand. Number 1, the fact that Laura can be sent from anywhere, and number 2, the fact that Borea can send from anywhere as well. It doesn't have to be from the field. It can be any card from anywhere, your hand or your field. So we're going to do this. We're going to normal summon Laurel. We're going to link 1. We're going to go into our Dryas. Oh, sorry, this is upside down. So just put it over here. Next, we're going to be special summoning this. We're going to be equipping. And now we're going to be using the effect of board, but we're not going to be sending from the field like we normally would. We're going to use the effect to pitch the Sunbind Sewing from the hand in order to add. I'm just not going to add because I don't want to go to the deck again, but that's what we want to do. Next, we're going to be linking off these two in order to summon a Jasmine. And by game mechanics, because it's an equip, the Laurel is going to fall off. And oh, would you look at that? It's been sent from the spell trap zone to the graveyard. Laurel is going to trigger, gain 500 life points, and that's going to trigger the Jasmine to search. And we're going to search, of course, our second unconditional extender. Now we're going to do special summoning. We're going to special summon it to the zone that Jasmine points to. And if you've been paying attention in the video, you know that now we have Jasmine plus Tribute, which leads us to the full combo through the Jasmine loop around play. So the fact that this card is able to trigger from being sent from anywhere is an extremely relevant point and allows you to start with hands that you have no real business starting with. Another example is just these two, right? Normal summon, special summon, hard link these two into Jasmine, effective Laurel, effective Jasmine. So just being able to use this card plus any special summon extender in order to start your combo when you normally wouldn't is a really, really useful point, right? It doesn't have to be just a combo piece. It can be a pseudo starter when you need it to be. Just make sure not to trigger this effect to gain life points the first time you send it to the graveyard. It is a hard once per turn. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing to remember, again, another very minor thing that normally doesn't come up much, but it can come up, and when it does, you'll wish you knew it, is Peony. So when you mill with Peony, the restriction on this card is that it cannot be used as linked material. But there are two ways you can skirt that restriction. First of all is with Peony's second effect. If you don't know, second effect is that it allows you to modify the levels of monsters it points to. You target basically one plant monster in grave, and all the monsters it points to become that level. So if you mill like two random cards and you have like a Borean grave, you just target Borean, make them both level 8 overlay. Very simple. So that's not one way to skirt the restriction. The other more like relevant way I would say is if you mill a Lone Fire Blossom. This is like one of your most powerful kind of mills because what you can do is you distribute this, summon out Loki, and then you full combo. But before you do that, what you want to do is you want to tribute the Lone Fire Blossom itself, summon another Lone Fire Blossom from the deck. Because what you've done here is you just reset the link restriction on your Lone Fire, and then next you tribute this off, summon the Loki at the field, and now in case you need to, your Lone Fire can be tributed off for the cost. Can be linked off if need be. So that's just something to keep in mind. You know, Peony, you want to make sure that you have skirt the restrictions as much as possible. There's very little downside to tributing the Lone Fire. Sure, you're kind of punished by Called by the Grave, and like if you're really trying to play on Called by, maybe you don't do that. But in most situations, you're not going to be punished for using Lone Fire itself before you use Lone Fire on the Peony. So that's the second thing to remember. The third thing to remember is zone placement. So zone placement is extremely important in this deck because remember that your only way to interact with non-plant monsters in this deck is through Jasmine, right? Every single other card in your extra deck or your main deck is going to take a plant monster. And if you have a non-plant monster or, especially this is relevant playing against your elements, if you have a face-down monster, those monsters are dead on the field. And remember how important it is for us to have enough bodies, right? We cannot afford to waste a single body in this deck, which means that if you're playing against any matchup where you expect to have to deal with something like flipping face down especially, right, you need to make sure that when you summon a monster that is likely to get flipped face down, for example, something like a Loki is probably like the number one possibility, right, you summon it to which zones? You summon it to mid zone, left zone, or right zone. Now, I strongly recommend that the zones that you place it to are either the leftmost and the rightmost zone, because these zones, Jasmine points to these two zones, which means you have the ability to tribute this off. But the reason you don't want to place it in the mid zone is because, let's say in a situation, very, very rarely comes up, but I think it's come up once for me. In a situation where, let's say you summon Jasmine and they decide, oh, let's remove the Jasmine, right? Well, if you're able to make a second Jasmine and get to a third body here, right, then you can go for this combo, the battle phase, attack, attack. But if you put this in the mid zone, well, notice the problem here. Now you've blocked off Jasmine's second pointer here, right? Which means that if you want to use the heal effect before you want to use the tribute effect, like if you want to bait out the tribute effect, having any monster here, this includes like a nib or anything else, right, means that now you have to use the tribute effect Jasmine first, which is not ideal because, as we mentioned before, we want to save that effect. If you have the face-down monster in the leftmost zone or in the rightmost zone, that's not a problem because you just put the Jasmine like over here instead, and you have this over here, and then you can do that. And if you want, you can even summon another Jasmine. But just in general, right, it's good to not block off your mid zone so that you don't have to deal with problems like that. So that's just another thing to keep in mind, right? If you're dropping a nib or you're snatch stealing your opponent's monster, which is something like triple tactics, right? You just want to have them in this zone or this zone. Okay, so moving on. One final thing to keep in mind, I think this is the last thing I want to talk about, is that for whatever reason, there is a ruling that you can tribute if you're using an effect that tributes, unless it's lone fire, which specifically says face up. If you're using like if you're using any of the weak effects, even though your face up monster has no type and has no attribute, Konami just says for some reason that if you're tributing your own monsters, you can actually tribute face down monsters because you can know things about your face down monsters. So if I activate Mudan's effect in hand, I can tribute off my face down seed in order to summon it up. The same is true for a card like Glamour, because just like Mudan, Glamour says tribute one plant monster. It doesn't say tribute one face up plant monster, it just says tribute one plant. So you can tribute a face down plant monster in order to activate Glamour. And this is very important. As before I mentioned, every body matters, right? So zone placement, make sure that you have things in the right position. Right. And yeah, that's basically it. There is one final thing, excuse me. So the last thing to think about is holding up your normal summon. So when you're in a position where you are not able to like perfectly play around Nibiru or like perfectly play around a hand trap, it really pays. Let's say, for example, you open something like this is the most common situation that this comes up. And like by far the most common, I'd say, is if you open unexpected die, plus something like Sunset Genius Loci. You can also do it with like Lone Fire plus die, but with Lone Fire plus die, you can just get to something like you could get to something like Boya early, so it's less relevant. But like this is probably the most common situation when it comes up. Maybe like, or perhaps like for example, let's say that you already opened with a sewing, right? And then you have your sewing. Okay, let me just see if I can find it. Like your sewing, and then you open like any level 4. Like for example, you open something like Primula, like something like this, right? So the reason that holding up your normal summon is really important is because you're on Shrine. So let's just go with the most common. We have Die, plus we have Loki. We never want to summon out Loki unless we have to, because let's say you activate Die, we're going to bring out Loki, and in this hand, obviously you have no direct way to play around Nibiru, right? If you get nibbed, that's unfortunate. But the thing is, most people are most commonly going to nib you. I'm just going to do this combo like this, just because I don't want to switch it up again. But we're going to do Sewing, and then we're going to go 1-2. As usual, we're going to summon our Twin, we're going to summon out our Healer, or Thrasher, whatever one you want to pick. So for whatever reason, people love to nib here. And I don't know why they do, but this is just like a really, really popular time to nib. But one of the things that's peculiar, and this is probably just for simplicity's sake, right? But people tend to put their nib token in like either the mid zone or they put it in these two left and right zones. And in this situation, if you have your normal summon, you're actually in a pretty good position. So your whole board gets wiped, whatever, it's gone, cool, who cares? You have a nib token. Now, normal summon, Link, Dryas, effective Dryas. And because we play Shrine, we can do this. If we don't play Shrine, we can't do this. Activate Shrine, pitch whatever card, Shrine summon back, Link 1. Where is it? Jasmine. Effective Jasmine costs tribute nib token, and now you get to play. So hold up your normal summon if you can, especially in situations where you're not playing hard playing around nib. Don't get greedy and summon out because you want to. It's very important that you have some sort of follow-up through something like a Nibiru, because if you get blown out and you pass on token, especially in this build where you're not playing that many hand traps, you're mostly playing like second cards, you will lose. Like you're not going to be able to stop your opponent with hand traps after you lose your engine. You have pretty much nothing. So it's very, very important here that you make sure you leave some sort of follow-up around a card like Nibiru. When you play this, you're kind of like you're almost like riding on a knife's edge a lot of the time. So that's one more thing to keep in mind. The final thing I want to discuss, and I'll keep this up as well because this is also relevant to the Nibiru example, is Mardell. So Mardell is a card that the majority of Sunavalon players have decided to cut. And the reason for this is because Mardell is an extremely, extremely bricky card. This is Mardell, a level 9 generator monster. In the past, people made this card because what they would do is they would like summon board out early and use a standard combo to get to this and have that extra body to combo off. But it's a level 9. It has no summoning condition. The only way you summon it out is either from hand or deck, but when it's summoned out, it gets to search any plant monster in your deck. This card is like just awful to draw. It's a hard brick. It's even shaped like a brick. You can look at her, like she's shaped like a brick. She's a fucking brick. So if you draw her, like, unless you can bring her out of her hand with Snowdrop, she is absolutely doing nothing in your hand. However, playing this card allows you to get a much higher ceiling in situations where you get to the vaunted Jasmine plus tribute situation. Because, like I mentioned this earlier, but I said if you start with Sunvine Sowing, like if you activate Sowing and you get to this position, then you're not doing anything. Because if you go into Lone Fire, tribute this, get Loki, link Loki, what are you going to search? You're going to search Shrine? It's not going to get you anywhere. But if you play the Mardell, then even if you start with Sunvine Sowing, you're still getting to full combo off. And I'll show you how this is done. So let's say, for example, in this situation, we start with Sunvine Sowing. We get to our three bodies, like Shrine plus Extender, we're going to Tribute, and we're going to summon out Mardell from our deck. And then Mardell's going to trigger, and the effect is going to allow us to search a plant monster. And we're going to go ahead and grab a copy of Aramage Laurel. We're not going to normal summon Laurel, because we start with Sunvine Sowing, we have not normal summoned. We're going to link these two off, and we're going to make a copy of Jasmine. And now, Laurel's going to trigger, we're going to search twice, and then we're going to get to, oh, doesn't this seem familiar? We're going to get to our Borea, we're going to get to our Princess, whatever. And now, as you can see, where I can find the card. I get these two, summon this out, and as you can see, because we play Mardell, we now get to the Link 2, Link 2, Link 1 situation, even though we started with Sunvine Sowing. In addition, in that exact same scenario that I showed earlier, where you get Nibiru, you can still get to this exact same position. So let's say, for example, let's just go back. We're going to look at the Nibiru situation, where we've Unexpected died, we've got Nibbed, so this is wiped, this is wiped. This is wiped over here, and this is wiped over here. Let's say we've gone through these four. So now, what are you going to do in this situation? So you're going to normal summon, just like in our previous example. We're going to normal summon on Loki. Do this upside down, just to maybe make it a bit more clear this time. We're going to normal summon our Loki, right? And we're going to go for our standard combo. We're going to go for the Dryas. Dryas effect is going to grab a copy of Shrine, which is sitting here, around here somewhere. It's over here, sorry. Yeah, so we're going to get our Shrine like before because they're not good. And I haven't leaked the goo yet. They're going to put the Nib token in the mid zone just because, that's what everyone does. So now effective Shrine is going to summon back this. But here we're going to have a slight deviation. We're not going to immediately link. Instead, we're going to link this off into a copy of the Sunvine Healer because we need to get higher life points than our opponent. We're now going to link these two off. We're going to go into our Jasmine. Jasmine is going to tribute the Nib token. We're going to bring up Mardell because we're now playing this. Effective Mardell is going to add the Laurel, and because we went through our second healer here, the first healer here, if we go through, doesn't actually trigger because it has to target a Sunavalon Link monster. If you nib, then the target's gone, so we don't know what the link rating is, so it doesn't get any healing. Or if you went through Thrasher, then it's the same thing. The second one does know. So now we have 300 more life points in our opponent. We're going to special summon out our Laurel here. We're going to link these two off into our second copy of Jasmine. We're going to trigger Laurel to search. We're going to grab these two. We're going to special out. And oh, doesn't that look familiar? So even through Nibiru here, we are going to full combo them. So if that appeals to you, the fact that through Nibiru, or at any point, if you get to the three bodies, your ceiling is going to be much higher. If that interests you, then you should play this card, right? And again, this situation comes up all the time. This card is not a dead card by any means. It is incredibly powerful in the situations where it comes up. The problem is that, unfortunately, it is a hard brick, and it's not a card that you really want to draw. And it is also that conflict of you most want this card going second, not going first, because if you go second and you're playing through Interruption, this extra body comes up a ton. But at the same time, you really, really, really don't want to leave this card in your main deck going second, because if you draw this, you're hard punished by the brick, just like the trap card. So you want to side this out, but you also want to see it going second, which means like you're in that weird position where it's only good game one if you lose the die roll and you also don't draw it, or if you get nibbed or something going first. It's a card that I really like. I think I recommend people test just because I think it's very underrated. I don't think it's a card that's it's not 100% correct to play or not play it. I just don't recommend it in big tournaments because it's just so ass to draw and like you really, really don't want to see it. But yeah, so just as an example here, right, because we played Mardell, now we're able to get to full combo despite having been nibbed or despite having started with Sunvine Sowing, right? That's the power of having this card in your deck. And yeah, so really that is it. An hour and a half video. I don't know if anyone's going to sit through this whole thing, but hopefully if you enjoy the deck or if you want to learn it, then this was educational and informative. So thank you guys. Shout out to the Sunavalon server. And take care. I will see you all